Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling review series. This is the December 5th edition, 1981. We continue in the foray of this program. Sandy Scott out again, basically telling us that he is, in fact, extremely happy with the options he has for new people. And then we see Roberts and Blackjack Mulligan Jr., aka Barry Windham, eventually known as Barry Windham, but not quite yet, against Tony Russo and Jerry Felder. Roberts is a regular tag team guy in the area at the point. His teaming with what ends up being Barry Windham is pretty massive at the time, kind of just giving him a veteran to work with. Roberts goes, kind of hooks on arms, gets a bunch of arm ringers and locks, and that Blackjack Jr. comes in, actually hits a middle rope forearm, other basic maneuvers, real basic stuff, drives the knee into the hammerlock, and again, Roberts kind of takes over with Russo and Felder whenever necessary. Tackles by Jake Roberts a couple of times, headlock takeover, and the like. Again, they're trying to get the belts off of only Anderson and Gene Anderson. Kind of a hard thing to follow in 81 because there's a lot of times where there's championships and no one mentions what the championships actually are. So a little bit hard to follow when you're kind of reviewing. Bob Cuttle and David Crockett, not exactly the best at telling us who's who. It almost seems like there's too many championships. Also, with missing weeks, there's also some challenges as it relates to when someone gets beat. They don't always tell you right away. Backbreaker, though, by Blackjack Jr. leads to a victory, and the knee lift by Jake Roberts also helps in that foray. Anyway, we see Big John Studd with an unnamed championship belt at the time, and he is back in the area, although we don't really hear exactly how long he's been gone. He slaps Blackjack Mulligan Jr. in a previous foray into things. Basically says that he will take care of whomever, wherever, and that he will take care of both Blackjack Sr. and Jr. Also, we then see John Studd making his way into the ring at this point, and we are told he faces off against Tim Horner. Obviously, Horner, I don't know that that's correct, mainly because I thought Tim Horner didn't start for another into 82, but maybe I could be wrong. Anyway, John Studd in green, looking like a leprechaun, certainly gets some basic stuff, does the step over the top rope thing, and actually does some basic wrestling moves. Takes the man down, tries to get a sit out with a couple of things there. Body slam by Studd. Studd managing to use his power. Not a big surprise there by any stretch of the imagination, but you kind of see Studd still agile here in 1981. Of course, by 85 or so, he's lost some of that agility, but through the 70s and early 80s, the enhancement talent has to cover up against John Studd. Studd obviously hitting a couple or missing a couple of forearms in the corner, trying to get as much of an advantage as he can in the simplest form possible, and again using his power and manhandling his adversary. Also gets the man up for a bear hug, and the referee has to step in. Sandy Scott encouraging people to challenge for the car that's been given away. Ricky Steamboat out, cuts promo, basically saying that bringing out a trash bag of fan mail. He wants Piper for the Mid-Atlantic Championship belt, and Sandy Scott is out again. Sandy Scott's a major character in the program. However, there is a forced contract signing where they battle over a pen. Basically, Piper says he's been bullied into defending the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship. Of course, that is the biggest championship in the area, although we are not necessarily told when exactly Piper won that championship on television. He just shows up with it 1 week. When we started this in September, he wasn't with the championship, so that's kind of interesting. But Steamboat and his adversary are in fact Steamboat and Piper are in fact going to go at it in the not too distant future. Here we move into the run of next series. Jim Nelson is up next. Sergeant Slaughter comes out first, basically putting out the Cobra Clutch Challenge. Jim Nelson up next as the, for lack of a better term, private of Sergeant Slaughter. Nelson faces Tim Horner, which is why I'm curious about Horner being mentioned in the previous match by the announcers, because either A, same guy wrestles twice back to back, or maybe it's from separate programs, or B, somebody got a name wrong there anyway. But young Tim Horner is here, and Jim Nelson, aka the man who later becomes Boris Zukov. Decent mat wrestling there. Nelson has a bit more size, cranks up on him after, some basic stuff, including things like a fireman's carry, takes him over, gets him down, and stays on him a little bit. Basic wrestling and power used by Nelson. The opponent goes to the outside, brings him back in. Even an attempted modified camel clutch used by Nelson at a midpoint in the match doesn't actually hook the hold in, but you can see he's trying to use it, and then again, Nelson hits some running clotheslines. Basic stuff, longer match than it needs to be, especially if you're just getting the guy over. Big back body drop by Nelson, and kind of a more one-sided match. Nelson, of course, winning the contest in the end. Hype for the Sergeant Slaughter defending the U.S. Championship at upcoming house show tonight at the Charlotte Coliseum. And I mean, Slaughter, basically saying he doesn't really want to defend. And again, Piper talking, Anderson and Piper both talking about challenging for the Cadillac as they plug Charlotte that night as well. Then we go to the next in the series of matches. Another main babyface that we have here is featured in the next match. Jeff Swords against Jay Youngblood. Youngblood being the guy that's featured. They say that Swords, this is his first foray into wrestling here. Youngblood gets kind of a modified Indian deathlock, and both guys a little awkward, kind of rolling over into the ropes. Attempted pinfall that doesn't go anywhere. Swords has a bit more power, but the history and experience and explosiveness of Youngblood gets him an advantage. Youngblood spins the man around. Interesting that they would give him a match with a guy who really is an enhancement talent for several minutes here. Gets a couple of chops off, and Youngblood manages to get the victory. Blackjack Mulligan Jr. is in a promo after Youngblood gets a victory, and he's talking about, and for the record, a big splash is the way that he gets a victory. Kind of a pivoted splash, and 1, 2, 3. But anyway, Blackjack Mulligan and Jake Roberts both talk about the need to eliminate Ole Anderson and the Andersons in general. Mulligan Sr. talks about wanting to challenge John Studd in a promo, but also talks about kind of wanting to get rid of things here. Then we move to a tag team match. Another interesting foray into the area as we see Ole Anderson and Ray Stevens versus Paul Jones and Buddy Landel. Just an interesting run of a tag team there. I don't know the history of the guys in the area enough to know whether that is a consistent tag team, but obviously this is the beginning of the heel of the babyface turn for Ray Stevens in the area. But anyway, Ole Anderson and Ray Stevens are teamed up here. Paul Jones, nothing to write home about by any stretch of the imagination, but the fans are behind him anyway, obviously because of his history in the area, and they continue to be here. Stevens, one of the best bumpers in the area, also more willing to brawl around than ever before. Landel, new to the sport, and Ole Anderson doesn't waste any motion. Hooks up on him with headlocks, go behind early by Landel. Landel, I guess, put in the babyface position. Landel gets side headlocks and ride time on both guys, Stevens and Anderson, during the early stages of the match. Hard shots there, and Landel bounces off the ropes and kind of, gets things going in a difficult direction, as it were. We see Ole Anderson cranking down on the arms of Buddy Landel. Landel does the majority of selling, although eventually Paul Jones comes in and takes a good bit of punishment. Anderson trying to break the arm of Jones for the second part of the match pretty aggressively here. Again, kind of rolls behind him, gets a basic series of maneuvers, doesn't get everything he wants, but Anderson takes the majority of the match. Stevens comes in, and there's miscommunication between the two, between Anderson and Stevens. They actually come to blows, which leads to obviously dissension in those ranks, and then we see more hype for the Charlotte upcoming event on that particular evening. Paul Jones, Ricky Steamboat, and Jake Roberts also talk about the Cadillac. Blackjack Mulligan talks about Junior wants the U.S. title from Sergeant Slaughter. Then we go to a enhancement match, for lack of a better term, with a couple minutes left in the program. Carl Fergie against Larry Hamilton. Fergie ends up being a tag team champion within a couple weeks. Again, something that's undersold in the Mid-Atlantic world. But in any event, Hamilton, with some good fireman's carry takeovers and other pinning attempts, basic maneuvers, and the like, and Fergie ends up coming up with more of the advantage. Again, they've got about maybe 5 minutes in total. Fergie with snapmare takeovers and other basic maneuvers. Fergie kind of ends up coming out the better. A very basic, almost, I'd say, enhancement level match here. And Fergie gets a victory at the last minute. We will close with that. We'll be back with more right after this.